So, Mackenzie, we're working on an episode, you and I, about the Jesuits, and it looks kind of at the history of the Jesuits, and also kind of goes through in the function of where they were in the early founding of America and some of what was going on with Abraham Lincoln, and then we kind of come and look at what's happening today, and in that process, we've been collecting news articles and clips and things like that, and we're looking at this one and we're like, wow, we have to just do a video on this, almost like a commentary about how well known the relationship is between the Jesuit order and the President of the United States, and the fact that the Pope Francis, is the first Jesuit Pope in history. And a lot of people don't understand. Maybe you can give a little 2 cents on who the Jesuits are.
Well, this was a very interesting clip, which is why we want to comment on it. But the Jesuits, they are a secret order, or not so secret anymore, but a lot of the internal things are secret. They basically were set up as the military, the army, or the enforcement part of the Roman Catholic Church. And even in some countries, years ago, in Catholic countries, they banned the Jesuits because they were so violent. So this is not a friendly order. This is something serious. It's militant, and the fact that people are not knowing this, not knowing the history, not knowing the purpose of the Jesuits, just the fact that, and I think we've read this on the podcast before, but the Jesuit oath says right in it what they're all about. And all the Jesuits, up until today even, still have to take this Jesuit oath before they become a Jesuit. And it says right in the oath that they discriminate neither age nor sex nor race nor anything, and a lot of heinous things that they will do to people. You can look it up for yourself. And we've shared it on the podcast before, what is in this Jesuit oath. So this is not something to just, think it's okay to happen in the background. It's a big connection here that we're seeing, and something that we really need to pay attention to. And so when Matt brought this clip, we said right away, we need to talk about this and we need to share this because it shows the connection between everything.
Yeah, the depth of relationship between the Jesuits. Now, we're going to take a look at Rachel Maddow, and she's like one of the top 5 main news shows in the ratings. Ratings between like Tucker Carlson and Hannity and some of these other cast of characters that they have representing in the media these days. But even Rachel Maddow herself seems to have a particular interest in Biden's relationship with the Vatican and kind of comparing it to JFK and the contrast between those, which we did a little bit in the last Prophecy Report episode. But here, let's take a look, and we're just going to kind of talk about what she's saying here and have a chance for people to kind of see how close the connection is between the Jesuits and the leader of the free world, essentially, in Biden as the president of the United States of America, which the Bible just happens to say, watch out for America coming in our future, a religious power preaching and establishing Roman principles as law. So let's take a listen.
A lot has been made of the fact now that President Joe Biden is only the second Catholic president after JFK, and therefore he's just the second Catholic president to have an audience with the Pope. That, of course, is true. But it also simplifies it too much. It fails to capture how much the world has changed since Kennedy visited the Vatican 6 decades ago. And
let's just stop it there for a sec. So that's a very, she's emphasizing everything here. Like, we don't even have to do hardly any commentary, it seems, because she's emphasizing all the parts that we would emphasize. She says that this is not as simple as it shows the difference in the world from when Kennedy to when Biden is running now. So when Kennedy came in, what was the situation there?
Well, people were not happy. I mean, the first Catholic president in history, the people were not happy about his Catholicism. In fact, it was a main campaign point for him in some of the key states like West Virginia, where he would not let his Catholicism come before his duty to his country, because the issue with Catholics has historically been, where do their first loyalties lie, country or Pope? And or king, I guess I should say, because technically the Pope is seen as a civil ruler, as a monarchy, head of a civil monarchy. So that's a stark contrast between just 60 years later. She mentions 6 decades. So the transformation between Protestants being aware of this issue and having issues with it, although JFK was elected, and there's no problem with that. I'm going to reiterate, we have no problems with practicing Catholics. We asked them to look at the constructs of the system that they're in, but we're not against individuals who are in there. So
for sure.
This is not an indictment of those individuals. This is just a look at the system itself. And you see that Protestants understood that 60 years ago. So I think what this really represents is like almost a bookend, right? The beginning and an ending point. The first Roman Catholic president to the second. We've seen the transformation of Protestantism in there change more than
totally
anything.
Changed.
And what it's done is transformed to the sympathy of Roman Catholicism, to the point where what we're seeing here, Maddow is pointing out that very contrast.
Yeah.
In a great many ways, President Biden's Catholicism is much less of a fraught political issue than when Kennedy was in office. Yes, that nobody is really even debating anymore whether or not the Pope is secretly pulling the strings when it comes to how the U.S. is governed.
So I'm going to stop it right there. Another key point of JFK's issue, Catholic issue with the voting public, was that point right there, that the Vatican would be secretly ruling the United States through the Catholic president. And now she's stating that nobody has those same questions. But has Rome changed in 60 years for us not to have those same concerns?
Mm-hmm. Definitely not. They say they haven't changed.
No, they haven't changed for millennia, let alone a 60-year time period. Rome does not change. So the only direction that the sympathy has gone towards is towards Roman principles to allow for this type of thing to occur. And I think it's fair to ask if the papacy still has hands in the controlling interest, because Biden, as a practicing Catholic, doesn't he have to confess to his priest?
Yep.
Absolutely. Right? So who is his priest? We find out it's a guy named Leo O'Donovan, Father Leo O'Donovan, who just happens to be a Jesuit priest. So we find often that the practicing Catholics that are in high positions of power in the world confess almost exclusively to Jesuit priests. And Leo O'Donovan gave Biden's opening prayer when he was sworn in at his inauguration, and also has a very, very close relationship with Biden, citing many, many times the support that Leo O'Donovan had for him during the death of his son. And he's very open, as Maddow is saying, about how much his Catholicism means to him and how close he is with these Jesuit priests. Because the reason we're kind of talking about this is people give us, you and I, Mackenzie, and even Amazing Discoveries, a hard time sometimes for talking about this stuff, for talking about the Jesuits and thinking that, we don't need to spend that much time working on it. But what we are supposed to do is preach the 3 angels' messages, and that third angel's message warns that the United States is going to make this image and enforce this mark that will all be based on the influence of the papacy. But within the papacy, it's specifically the Jesuit order, right, that has some of the biggest influence on this.
And that's why, and we're going to, in some upcoming episodes, read through a document that is going through all the enforcement of Sunday in a religious sense. A lot of people think, maybe it'll come through climate change. I do think these are drivers. But in the end, the punchline is actually religious worship law that is going to come over Sunday. And so this is why we're bringing up all these topics, because this is what happened in the past, and there's nothing new under the sun. The world repeats itself, and we're seeing the same thing happen again.
And why does it repeat itself? Is because human nature remains the same as it has since the beginning. It's fallen, right? So the fallen human nature will always default back to the fallen principles when God's protective hand is not staying the tide. And that was America for a long time. We'll get back on track to the video here, but we see that's changing to become more dragon-like. And even in Italy right now, where Meloni, the new Italian prime minister, who's being called the Christian mother, has been on record as praising Mussolini, and you're seeing fascist symbolism go up all over the place. So we're defaulting back to this historical authoritarian viewpoint of Christianity.
For his part, President Biden has not had to tiptoe around the fact that he's Catholic. He regularly attends Mass. He's met with 3 different popes over the course of his political career. In fact, he's apparently felt so comfortable with all the various pontiffs that he famously told Pope Francis's predecessor, Pope Benedict, to his face that he was being, quote, entirely too hard on the American nuns. You have to be comfortable enough with the Pope to tell him, hey, Mr. Infallible, I got a bone to pick with you.
And there, again,
hey, Mr. Infallible. Yep. So Rachel Maddow is clearly familiar enough with her history to understand the papal claims of infallibility and where those may extend to. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think it's very interesting because we're talking about someone who's reporting on this, who obviously has a strong interest and is very familiar with all the practices here. So this isn't something that they don't understand. They understand the Pope's side and Biden's side and what this is actually meaning, or they wouldn't be putting so much emphasis. They see that there has been a total shift in the focus, and just showing that she knows the details by understanding the Pope claims infallibility.
There's a lot of people that would say the President of the United States is kind of the highest ranking position publicly in the world. And here she's saying, oh, because he's Catholic, how dare he say something to the Pope, Mr. Infallible. So it automatically put the President of the United States in a secondary position to the Pope, did it
100%,
not?
Yes. The fact
it totally
that
did.
How could he even say that? He must be close enough because he's...
Exactly. It must be a personal thing because the person in that position of power would never say to the infallible vicar of God that he's being too hard on these nuns. So again, there's people may say we're dissecting this too much, but there's a lot going on here that I don't think people maybe on the surface would even realize how much depth. So let's keep going.
Yeah. He has met with this Pope. He's met with Pope Francis numerous times in the past. He even keeps a picture of one of their past meetings in the Oval Office.
Okay. So now Biden's Catholicism with the king of a civil monarchy is so strong that he keeps a picture at the front row over his, I guess, left shoulder in the Oval Office. There would be Protestants, the early founding of America, that would really not like this.
It's probably therefore no surprise that by all accounts today's visit went well. The two held a private meeting for close to 90 minutes. That's triple the length of the meeting that President Trump held with Pope Francis when he visited back in 2017. Aside from just looking genuinely happy to be there, you could tell that President Biden had been looking forward to this visit for some time. I know this is true not just because of how warmly they hit it off, but also because of the gift that he brought for the Pope.
Take note on the gift.
like me, sort of make a habit of following the visits that world leaders make to the Vatican, you know that they all bring gifts. Most of the time, they're not that memorable. But President Biden today basically dropped the mic on future papal gifts. He's going to make it hard for everybody from here on out. He presented the Pope with basically liturgical vestments, the vestments that priests wear when they're saying Mass. And this was not just any set of those. It was one designed nearly 100 years ago by one of the most famous papal tailors in the world. It was hand-woven in 1930. It was worn during a visit to the United States by a cardinal who would later go on to become Pope Pius XII. In the years since, those vestments have been looked after and taken care of by the Jesuit order here in the United States. Not to belabor the point here, but this is like essentially like giving a really big Yankees fan like the Babe Ruth jersey from the World Series game where he hit 3 home runs.
So
let's look at that. Do you give your casual acquaintances or strangers or anything, like in that reference, maybe the most valuable piece of sports memorabilia in history?
Mm-hmm. No, and this is very interesting because it was who had this in their possession for the last 100 years?
Yeah, the Jesuits had this prized possession. They were in charge of it.
So obviously Biden is close enough with the Jesuit order that he can say, hey, can I have this? I'm going to see the Pope. I would like to present this as a gift for him.
That has to be an ask that involves such, we have such a history that you can go ask such a thing and receive it. And on top of the fact that the vestment itself, which is worn during the Mass, and we have to keep in mind, the reason that's maybe so special is because the Mass, the priest actually turns in to some kind of sorcerer magician, essentially, at that point, through the use of transubstantiation, where they're literally the blood and body of Christ are produced in the ceremony, right? And so these vestments, in their view, hold very substantial power or part of it. Imagine the original Aaron priesthood vestment, and what that power could have, but none of it has power. It's God alone who has the power, right? And he could make the stones cry out if he wanted to. So it's it's again putting the emphasis on the material where moth and dust corrupt, rather than the God that would have the power to transubstantiate, but it is not in that Mass ceremony, nor is God interested in re-crucifying his son every day.
Yeah, it just shows the closeness here, and the ability for him to take that to the Vatican, to the Pope when he goes there, shows that we are not having this church-state separation anymore.
No, and that the sympathy towards Rome at the highest levels, because whether it's Biden standing there or one of the 7 Supreme Court justices standing there who have the same worldview as Biden, you're looking at the legislative arm of the United States and judicial arm representing sympathy towards Rome, which is exactly the perspective, what we think is a Bible perspective, what other people sometimes say is an Advent perspective, but we think it's just a Bible perspective. And if it's wrong, then it would be falling apart under the weight of scrutiny. But all we're seeing is it's fulfilling exactly like we expect it is going to, where eventually the Protestant power and the Roman power will be so in harmony with one another, they won't be able to see a difference. And at that point, that causes real problems for the world, but that's for a different time.
Yeah.
Future world leaders should forgo papal gifts. They will embarrass themselves. Nothing will. This was a good one. Don't try. The presidency and the politics around religion and Catholicism in particular have changed a lot since Kennedy met with Pope Paul in '63. We got proof of that today in seeing President Biden sit down with Pope Francis. But for all the ways that relationship has changed, the one between a Catholic leader and the leader of the world's Catholics.
That's a nice statement right there.
By the Catholic leader, Biden, and a leader of the world's Catholics, the Pope. Again, where does that put Biden?
Right underneath the Pope. He is subsidiary.
And every other Catholic, I'll not just put Biden in there.
Yep.
Where does that put every single other Catholic in the world, regardless?
Yep.
of rank or position.
Yep.
Second.
Exactly. She just laid out the pyramid structure here of power, that the top is the Pope. And that is what we've been talking about since the first podcast, is the whole structure of this New World Order system actually all peaks to this one system.
And for people who are like, oh, you're just making a big deal out of nothing, we're not trying to use this as like the smoking gun, haha, this is it. This is just like one more piece of evidence, the nature of the relationship, the fact that the equivalent to the one of the greatest sports memorabilia pieces in history being given in a clear example of friendship and closeness between the military organization of a foreign monarchy whose history just happens to be suppression and, just terrible, violent and bloody history, somehow is now sitting as moral authority of the world, and from a civil side have placed a number of highly sympathized papal loyalists within high positions of power. This is just one example of that, and to show just little pieces, because when you look, it's actually everywhere. And so that's why we kind of wanted to do this quick commentary, is to just show that even in these little things, when we're looking at mainstream news media's understanding of this and their reporting on the relationship, there is a level of understanding on this hierarchy, and it is clear that the Pope sits at the top as the public figure or man of sin that even Paul talked about in his writings, right?
Yes, this has been something going on for the last 2,000 years. This system has been setting up, and even longer than that, because it is referenced in Revelation as Babylon. So they took their structure from even before their time, because it is in essence just baptized paganism, because you have all the same structure, all the same gods and saints and all these things that the Bible clearly says we shouldn't be praying to these people, we shouldn't be worshiping them, and that's what the system is promoting. It's really spiritualism.
That's exactly right. And they give it away because they have all these Maltese crosses, and they have the fish miters and the staff that they walk around with. Those are all like, I can show you exactly where those are in systems priesthoods prior to the Vatican. I mean, that's what symbolism does. It leaves this imprint that you can trace back in time, and you see it's the pagan priesthood of Horus or Tammuz, or you just name whichever one you want through the list, but they're the pagan priesthood of old, basically, and dressed up in Christianity of today. But let's finish up here on this commentary.
So have the challenges facing our globe. In the readouts of the meeting today, we learned that President Biden and Pope Francis spoke a lot about the things you might expect, advocating for the world's poor and for people suffering from persecution. But something else took center stage during their meeting, something that wouldn't have been a focus 60 years ago and is now very much top of mind. The two apparently devoted much of their conversation today to the climate crisis, the need and the moral responsibility that they both believe in terms of tackling that issue head on.
The moral responsibility that they both believe in. I think that is the if we want to look at what about the climate change movement is the most dangerous thing in the religious movement that's coming, it's that morality statement, I think.
Yeah. And who defines that morality is even more important.
Exactly. And we know that those definitions of morality are going to be based on Catholic social teaching, not Protestant social teaching or true Protestant social teaching, right? And that Catholic social teaching is going to be upheld by all the worldview, the leaders that have that worldview. So rather than it being like hey, what do you think morality is? And what do you think morality is? It's more like, here is what morality is. It's the standard set by Catholic social teaching, which sets the papacy above all kingdoms on earth by their appointment by God. And so ultimately, it's really just reinforcing that structure that has been around for a very long time, as you said.
And we just want to show you guys this because it's just another piece in the puzzle, another sign that we are getting close to these things all culminating. And we should be awake, very awake, and aware of what's going on so that we know what we should be doing. And that we are not caught unaware when all these things start really going down.
Yeah, and not to get worked up, but to be able to keep our cool about it as these things start to happen, and not let emotion drive, because that's where Satan wants us, right? He wants us to be making these emotional, rash decisions when we should be building on the firm foundation of Christ. And when the winds and waves crash on it, we shouldn't have any worry. So hopefully we'll be able to do more of these commentaries and just be able to watch and converse on these things. Please like, subscribe, share, help get this message to other people, and keep an eye out for a future episode on the Jesuit order, where we'll take a walk through just like we do on the other things and let people know what we found.
And also, take a look at our adtv.watch. We have some really nice new features there. We were mentioning our bookmarking tool, so you can go through our videos and add bookmarks and share them. And then our app, Amazing Discoveries app. Go to, we have it out for Apple right now. We're working on Android. And you can go and watch all of our podcasts there. You can save them and share them, listen to the audio, and have that right on your phone.
Yeah, actually, the bookmarks tool is really cool. You can make tags on the bookmarks, so you can start tagging things, and then you can save groups and ideas based on the tags that you've applied to these things. I mean, we've really tried to go a great length to give you guys the ability to take this information and actionize it and share it, because we don't know how much longer we have to share this information, and we'll go as long as God allows. And other than that, we want to give you guys as much as you can in the meantime, as we can in the meantime, to help your journey in helping others.
Thank you very much, and we will see you guys in the next episode.